This 4-year-old beggar girl is left tied to an anthill, but a millionaire saw everything and does something that shocks everyone. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The scream sliced through the humid morning air like a sharpened blade, echoing between the low-rise buildings of, say, Harmony Creek, Ohio. It was Monday, 8:30 a.m., and Aurelius Damasceno, let's make it Aurelius Ace Davenport, 52, was driving his silver pickup truck towards the main Ford dealership when he heard that sound that made his blood run cold. It wasn't just any scream. It was the kind of desperate sound that made anyone stop what they were doing. Ace instinctively slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound came from the vacant lot next to Mama's Diner, a place he knew well from business lunches. Another scream, higher pitched this time, followed by cruel laughter that made Ace clench his fists on the steering wheel. He parked the truck haphazardly on the curb and ran towards the lot, his dress boots sinking into the reddish dirt. What he saw made his stomach churn. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, was tied near a huge anthill, ants already starting to crawl up her skinny legs. 3 teenagers, who looked to be between 15 and 16, were laughing and making nasty comments as they slowly walked away, as if watching a show. "You little bastards!" Ace yelled, running towards the child. The teenagers looked at him with disdain, but ran off when they saw the rage on the businessman's face. The girl was shaking violently, her huge brown eyes in a dirty, too thin face for her age. She was wearing a torn t-shirt and a skirt that had once been pink, but was now more brown than any other color. Ace began to untie the thick ropes that bound her, his hands trembling with anger and compassion. "Easy there, little one," he murmured, trying to keep his voice soft as he struggled with the tight knots. "It's over now. You're safe." The girl did not respond, just watched him with eyes that seemed to have seen much more suffering than any child should know. When he finally managed to free her, Ace noticed the red marks on her wrists and ankles, signs that this was not the first time she had gone through something like this. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching down to her height. "Iris," the girl whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming. "Iris," Ace repeated, feeling something stir in his chest. "That's a pretty name. Iris, where are your parents?" The girl's expression closed up even more, if that was possible. She shook her head slowly, and Ace understood without needing words. Orphan. A 6-year-old completely alone in the world. Ace looked around the vacant lot, noticing for the first time the details he had ignored in his rush to help the girl. There was a small pile of cardboard in a corner, protected by some wooden boards, leftover food scattered around, a thin, dirty blanket. That child was living there. "Iris, how long have you been living here?" he asked, still trying to process the situation. "Since Grandma Nazare." "Let's change that to Grandma Betty went away," she replied, her words almost inaudible. "And when was that?" "I don't know. A long time ago." Ace felt a lump in his throat. A 6-year-old living on the streets alone, with no one to protect her, vulnerable to any kind of violence. How had no one noticed? How had he himself never noticed? "Are you hungry?" he asked, noticing how the girl's arms looked like sticks inside the large t-shirt. Iris nodded quickly, and for the first time her eyes shone with something other than fear. Ace took out his wallet and pulled out some bills, but then stopped. Giving money to a 6-year-old to solve the problem? And then what? She would go back to the vacant lot, vulnerable to the same cruel teenagers, or worse. "Come with me," he said impulsively. "Let's have lunch at the diner." Iris hesitated, looking at her small pile of belongings. "You can grab your stuff," Ace said gently. The girl quickly gathered the dirty blanket and a rag doll missing an arm, hugging everything against her chest. Ace guided her to the diner, ignoring the curious glances of the other customers as they entered. Iris ate like she hadn't seen food in days, which was probably true. Ace watched in silence, his mind working furiously. He couldn't just let her go back to the streets, but he also didn't know exactly what to do. "Iris," he said after she finished eating, "would you like to come with me to a safe place?" The girl studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decide if she could trust him. Finally, she nodded. Ace knew he was making a decision that would change his life forever. He also knew that Miriam, let's say Meredith, his wife, would be furious. But looking at that small, vulnerable child, he found that he didn't care. As they drove towards his house in the upscale neighborhood of Harmony Creek, Ace thought about how he would explain the situation to Meredith. She had always made it clear that she didn't want children, that her social life and her appearance were more important than anything. But surely she would understand that this was an emergency situation. When the truck stopped in the garage of the large modern house, Iris looked around with wide eyes. She had never been in such a beautiful place. Ace took a deep breath, preparing for the most difficult conversation of his life. The front door opened before Ace could even use the key. Meredith Davenport appeared in the doorway, impeccable as always in her white linen dress and high heels, her blonde hair perfectly brushed, falling over her shoulders. At 45, she maintained the beauty that had made her the envy of all the women in Harmony Creek High Society. Her welcoming smile froze on her face when she saw Iris next to her husband. "Ace, what is this?" she asked, her voice as sharp as broken glass. "Meredith, I need to explain," he began, placing a protective hand on Iris's shoulder. "This is Iris. She was in a very dangerous situation and—" "No," Meredith interrupted, shaking her head vigorously. "Whatever you're thinking, the answer is no." Iris cowered behind Ace, feeling the hostility radiating from the elegant woman. It was the same kind of rejection she knew well from the streets, but coming from someone in such a beautiful house, it hurt even more. "Meredith, for God's sake, she's just a child," Ace said, keeping his voice low but firm. "I found her being tortured by teenagers. She was tied to an anthill." "And that's our problem," Meredith retorted, crossing her arms. "There are institutions to take care of these situations. You can't just bring a street kid into our house." At that moment, Benedita, let's make that Bernice, appeared in the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. The 58-year-old housekeeper had worked for the Davenport family for 15 years and knew her employer's moods very well. When she saw the small, dirty girl next to Ace, her grandmother's heart ached. "Goodness gracious," she murmured, approaching slowly. "Who is this child?" "Bernice, this is Iris," Ace said, grateful to have an ally. "She needs help. She needs a bath, proper food, a safe place to sleep." Bernice looked at Iris and saw something that touched her deeply. The girl reminded her of her grandson Michael, whom she had lost in a car accident 3 years ago. The same age, the same big, expressive eyes, the same fragility that awakened all maternal instincts. "Of course," Bernice said, reaching out to Iris. "Come with me, sweetie. We'll take care of you." "Bernice!" Meredith shouted, her voice rising an octave. "You're not going to enable this madness." "With all due respect, Mrs. Davenport," Bernice said, her voice calm but determined, "I can't ignore a child who needs help." Meredith looked between her husband and the housekeeper, realizing she was losing control of the situation. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "Ace, I need to talk to you. Now. In private." Ace followed his wife to the living room, while Bernice gently led Iris towards the downstairs bathroom. The girl looked back once, as if she wanted to make sure Ace hadn't disappeared. As soon as they were alone, Meredith exploded. "Have you completely lost your mind?" she yelled, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "Bringing a street kid into our house? Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation?" "Our reputation?" Ace repeated, incredulous. "Meredith, we're talking about a 6-year-old who was being tortured." "So what?" she retorted, her eyes gleaming with a coldness that Ace had rarely seen. "The world is full of children in bad situations. That doesn't mean we have to solve every problem." Ace was silent for a moment, watching the woman he had been married to for 18 years. When they met, Meredith was an ambitious young woman who dreamed of a life of luxury and social status. He had fallen in love with her beauty and determination, thinking she would mature over time. "Meredith, do you remember when we talked about having children?" he asked softly. Meredith's face contorted as if he had slapped her. That was a painful subject between them. After years of trying to get pregnant and discovering that she could not have children due to fertility problems, they had never touched on the subject again. "That's completely different," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "We were talking about our own children, not some random kid from the streets." "She's not just any kid," Ace said, feeling something breaking inside him. "She has a name. She has feelings. She's 6 years old and she's completely alone in the world. And why does that have to be our problem?" Meredith insisted. "Ace, you've worked your whole life to build our status in this town. Do you want to throw it all away because of a child we don't even know?" Ace walked to the window, looking at the manicured garden where Meredith liked to host her friends for afternoon tea. Everything in their lives was perfect on the surface. The beautiful house, the imported cars, the designer clothes, the dinners at expensive restaurants. But for a long time, he had felt an emptiness growing inside him. "Maybe it's time to figure out what really matters," he said, without turning around. "What really matters?" Meredith repeated, her voice rising to a hysterical tone. "What matters is that you're ruining our life because of some stupid impulse." At that moment, they heard the sound of laughter coming from upstairs. Bernice had bathed Iris and found some old clothes that had been donated to a charity drive that Meredith had organized years ago, but never delivered. Iris's laughter was a clear, crystalline sound that echoed through the house like music. It was the first time she had laughed in 3 years since her grandma Betty went away. Ace felt his heart warm with that sound. Meredith, however, became even angrier. "Did you hear that?" she said, pointing to the ceiling. "She's making noise. She's messing up our house. She's disturbing our peace." "She's being a child," Ace replied, finally turning to face his wife, "something we've apparently forgotten how to do." "Ace Davenport," Meredith said, her voice low and menacing, "you have until tomorrow morning to resolve this situation. Either that child leaves this house or I leave." "Meredith, don't argue with me," she yelled. "You choose, her or me." With those words, Meredith stormed out of the room, her heels echoing on the marble floor. Ace heard their bedroom door slam shut upstairs. He stood alone in the living room, the weight of his wife's words pressing on his shoulders. Upstairs, he could hear Bernice talking gently to Iris, and from time to time, the magical sound of the girl's laughter. Ace knew he had reached a point of no return in his marriage, but looking at the staircase that led to the upper floor, where a child was experiencing safety and love for the first time in years, he found that his choice had already been made. The next morning brought with it a suffocating tension that hung over the house like a storm cloud. Ace had spent the night on the living room sofa, unable to go up to the bedroom where Meredith slept, or pretended to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Iris's frightened face at the moment he found her tied to the anthill. At 6 in the morning, Bernice came down the stairs on tiptoe, surprised to find her employer awake, his hair disheveled and a distressed look on his face. "Mr. Davenport," she said softly, "did you sleep here?" "I couldn't sleep well," he admitted, rubbing his face with his hands. "How's Iris?" "Sleeping like an angel," Bernice replied, with a sad smile. "Poor thing was exhausted. But Mr. Davenport, I need to tell you something." Ace straightened up on the sofa, paying full attention. "During the bath, I noticed a few things," Bernice continued, lowering her voice. "The girl has old scars on her arms and back. And when I asked about her family, she told me that she lived with her grandmother until she went away. Mr. Davenport, this child has been alone for a long time." Ace's heart tightened even more. "How long do you think?" "From the way she talks, the way she acts, I'd say at least 2 or 3 years. A 6-year-old surviving alone on the streets of Harmony Creek." Bernice shook her head, her eyes teary. It's a miracle she's alive. At that moment, heavy footsteps echoed on the staircase. Meredith came down wearing a navy blue business suit, perfect makeup, her hair in an elegant bun. She was clearly prepared to leave. "Good morning," she said coldly, avoiding looking directly at her husband. "I hope you've made your decision, Ace." "Meredith, can we talk?" "There's nothing to talk about," she replied, grabbing her Italian leather purse. "The situation is simple. Either you resolve this problem today, or I'll resolve it another way." "What do you mean by that?" Meredith turned around, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "You know my sister Dalila. Let's make that Deirdre. She works with social services. One call from her and this child will be taken out of here by competent people." The threat hung in the air like poison. Ace knew Deirdre, a bitter 38-year-old woman who had always envied her older sister's wealth. She wouldn't hesitate to cause trouble if it could hurt Ace. "You wouldn't do that," he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "Test me," Meredith replied, heading for the door. "I'll be at the spa until 5 o'clock. When I get back, I want this house exactly as it was yesterday morning." The door slammed shut with a final sound that echoed through the house. Bernice and Ace were silent for a few moments, processing the threat. "Mr. Davenport," Bernice said finally, "is Mrs. Davenport serious?" "I've known my wife for 18 years, he replied bitterly. "She always gets what she wants." At that moment, a small voice came from the top of the stairs. "Uncle Ace?" Iris was on the first step, wearing a pink t-shirt that was too big for her and denim shorts that Bernice had managed to adjust overnight. Her brown hair was clean and combed, revealing a delicate face that had been hidden by the dirt of the streets. "Good morning, little one," Ace said, forcing a smile. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, I did," she replied, walking down the stairs slowly. "It was the first time in a long time that I slept in a real bed." The innocence of those words hit Ace like a punch in the gut. How could he send a child who had suffered so much back to the streets? "Iris, come have breakfast," Bernice said, reaching out to the girl. "I made pancakes just the way you like them." During breakfast, Ace watched Iris eat with the same care as someone who never knew when her next meal would be. She chewed slowly, savoring each bite, and secretly saved some pieces of bread in her shorts pocket. "Iris," he said gently, "you don't need to save food. There will always be food for you here." The girl stopped chewing, her big eyes filling with tears. "Promise?" she asked in a voice so small it could barely be heard. "I promise," Ace replied, feeling his heart break a little more. After breakfast, Bernice took Iris to the garden while Ace locked himself in the office, trying to find a solution. He called a few lawyers, but they all said the same thing. The adoption process was long and complex, especially without proper documentation of the child. Through the office window, he could see Iris in the garden, watching fascinated the butterflies that flew among the flowers. Bernice was sitting next to her, patiently answering the girl's curious questions about the plants and insects. "Grandma Bernice," he heard Iris ask, "why doesn't the lady in the blue dress like me?" Ace approached the window, his heart aching as he heard the question. "It's not that she doesn't like you, honey," Bernice replied diplomatically. "It's just that some people don't know how to handle changes." "Am I going to have to leave?" Iris asked, her voice filled with a sadness that no child should know. "I don't know, sweetie," Bernice said honestly. "But what I do know is that Mr. Davenport is trying to do what's best for you." At that moment, the office phone rang. It was Robert Silver, let's say Bob Silverman, his personal lawyer and longtime friend. "Ace, I got your message," Bob said. "I need to be straight with you. Without proper documentation, without knowledge of the child's legal situation, you're walking on very dangerous ground." "Bob, I can't just abandon her," Ace said, watching Iris play in the garden. "I understand your motivation, but you need to understand the consequences. If someone reports that you are with a child without legal authorization, It could become a criminal problem. Bob's words echoed in Ace's mind. He was putting not only his marriage at risk, but potentially his freedom and his business. At noon, he made a temporary decision. He would take Iris to spend the day at one of the dealerships, away from the tension at home, while he thought of a permanent solution. "Iris, would you like to see where I work?" he asked. The girl's eyes lit up. "Can I really go?" "Of course you can." During the drive to the dealership, Iris watched everything through the window with fascination. The city streets that she knew only as a dangerous place where she needed to survive now seemed different, seen from inside a safe car. "Uncle Ace," she said suddenly, "are you going to send me away?" The direct question caught Ace off guard. He stopped the car on the shoulder and turned to look at the girl. "Why do you ask that?" "Because everyone always sends me away," she said simply. "After Grandma Betty went away, nobody wants me to stay." Ace felt tears burning his eyes. "Iris, I want you to stay, more than anything in the world." "But the lady in the blue dress doesn't want me to," she observed with disturbing maturity. "Sometimes adults have problems that have nothing to do with children," Ace said, choosing his words carefully. "But I promise I'm going to find a way to keep you safe." "Even if it's hard?" Iris asked. "Even if it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life," he promised. That afternoon at the dealership, something unexpected happened. Iris demonstrated impressive intelligence, quickly memorizing the names of all the employees and asking smart questions about the cars. Carlos, let's make that Carl, the sales manager, was impressed. "Boss, this girl is too smart," he commented to Ace. "In half an hour, she's already memorized half the models we have on the lot." It was true. Iris had developed an exceptionally sharp memory during her years on the streets, a survival skill that was now proving useful in other ways. But when they returned home at 5 in the afternoon, Meredith was already waiting in the living room, and she wasn't alone. Deirdre Santos was sitting on the main sofa in the living room as if she owned the place, her legs crossed and an expression of superiority stamped on her thin face. At 38, she maintained a professional appearance that barely disguised the corrosive envy she felt for her older sister. Next to her, there was an unknown woman with a briefcase in her hands and a stern look. "Ace," Meredith said with false sweetness in her voice. "This is my sister Deirdre, who you already know, and Ms. Conceição Neves. Let's change that to Ms. Thompson, a social worker for the county." Iris hid behind Ace, instinctively feeling the danger in the situation. Her experiences on the streets had taught her to recognize when adults had bad intentions. "Mr. Davenport," the social worker said, standing up and extending her hand, "we received a report about a minor in an irregular situation at this residence." "A report?" Ace repeated, ignoring the outstretched hand and giving Meredith a furious look. "It's standard procedure," Deirdre said with a venomous smile. "When a child is taken off the streets without proper legal care, she needs to be properly relocated to specialized institutions." "Relocated?" Ace felt the blood boil in his veins. "We're talking about a child, not an object." "Precisely for that reason there are protocols," the social worker intervened. "Mr. Davenport, although your intention may have been good, you cannot simply pick up a child from the streets. There are legal procedures to be followed." At that moment, Bernice appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hands trembling as she held a dish towel. She had overheard the entire conversation, and her grandmother's heart was breaking. "Excuse me," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor, but the girl wasn't just on the streets. She was being tortured by teenagers. Mr. Davenport saved her. "Bernice," Meredith said coldly, "that's none of your business." "When it comes to a child suffering, it's the business of any decent human being," the housekeeper retorted, surprising everyone with her courage. Deirdre laughed scornfully. "How dramatic. The child will go to a suitable shelter, receive professional care, proper education. It's the best thing for her." "A shelter?" Iris spoke for the first time, her voice small but clear. What's a shelter? The innocent question created an awkward silence in the room. The social worker crouched down in front of the girl, forcing a professional smile. It's a place where children like you are safe, she said. With other children, with people who know how to take care of you. But I want to stay here, Iris said, clinging to Ace's leg. Uncle Ace and Grandma Bernice take good care of me. Honey, Deirdre said with false patience, you don't understand. This isn't your place. You need to be with people like you. People like me, Iris repeated, confused. Poor children, Deirdre explained crudely, ignoring the social worker's disapproving look. You don't belong in this world of luxury. Ace stepped forward, his face red with anger. How dare you talk to a child like that? I'm being realistic, Deirdre said, standing up. You live in a bubble, Ace. You think you can play happy family with a street kid, but the reality is different. Ms. Santos, the social worker interrupted, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Let's keep the focus on legal procedures. Of course, Deirdre said, composing herself. The fact is that the child needs to be transferred to an appropriate environment. Today, Ace felt the world spin around him. You can't just rip a child out of a home where she is happy and safe. Mr. Davenport, the social worker said, consulting her papers, do you have legal documentation proving your authorization to care for this minor? No, but do you have her birth certificate? Do you know her family situation? Have you undergone a psychological evaluation to verify your fitness as a caregiver? Each question was like a hammer hitting Ace's head. He knew he had no documentation, no legal authorization. He had acted on impulse, moved only by compassion. I saved her, he said desperately. I found her being tortured and brought her to a safe place. And that's commendable, the social worker said, but it's not legal. The child needs to be in appropriate custody while we investigate her family situation. What family situation? Ace shouted. She's an orphan! She lived on the streets for years. That still needs to be verified, the woman replied impassively. There are protocols, Mr. Davenport. Iris began to cry silently, tears streaming down her face as she clung tighter to Ace's leg. Bernice approached, her own tears beginning to fall. Please, Bernice said to the social worker, look how terrified she is. How can you do this to a child who has already suffered so much? Ma'am, Deirdre said impatiently, sentimentalism doesn't solve legal issues. The child is going where she needs to be. And where does she need to be? Ace asked, his voice filled with despair. In which shelter are you going to throw her? The social worker hesitated before answering. At the moment, the Municipal Shelter San Jose, let's change that to the Harmony County Children's Shelter, has an opening available. Bernice gasped. Harmony County Children's Shelter? But that place has a terrible reputation. The children live crowded together, malnourished. Those are rumors, Deirdre said quickly. It's an institution recognized by the county. It's a disgrace, Bernice retorted courageously. My sister-in-law worked there as a volunteer and told me about the conditions. Children sleeping on the floor, spoiled food, employees who mistreat. Enough, shouted Meredith, who had remained silent watching the discussion. Enough drama. Miss Thompson, do what you have to do. The social worker sighed and opened her briefcase. Mr. Davenport, please hand the minor over to my custody. She will be evaluated and placed in the most suitable environment. No, Ace said firmly, placing his hands on Iris's shoulders. I'm not handing her over. Sir, the social worker said, her patience running out. That's not an option. I can seek police reinforcement if necessary. The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Ace looked around the room, seeing Meredith's triumphant expression, Deirdre's cruel smile, the social worker's impatience. Then he looked down and saw Iris trembling with fear, her big eyes fixed on him as if he were her only hope in the world. Uncle Ace, she whispered, You promised you were going to keep me safe." The girl's words were like a dagger to Ace's heart. He had promised, and now he was being forced to break that promise by bureaucracy and the cruelty of his own wife. "Please," he said, his voice almost breaking, "give me at least a week. A week to resolve the documentation, to do this the right way." "Impossible," Deirdre said. "The child is going now." "Deirdre," Ace said, staring at his sister-in-law, "why are you doing this? What harm has Iris done to you?" "It's not personal," Deirdre lied. "It's for her own good." But Ace could see the truth in her eyes. It was personal. It was about power, about showing that she could destroy her older sister's perfect life. It was about envy turned into cruelty. At that moment, Iris let go of Ace's leg and took a step forward. At 6 years old, she looked directly at the social worker. "Ma'am," she said with an impressive dignity for a child, "if I go with you, are they going to hurt me again?" The simple and direct question left everyone in the room speechless. The social worker blinked several times, clearly shaken by the child's painful maturity. "No," she said finally, her voice less firm. "Nobody's going to hurt you." "That's what adults always say," Iris replied sadly. "But then they always hurt me." The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Ace's phone ringing. It was his secretary from the main dealership. "Mr. Davenport," said Regina's worried voice, "I need to speak with you urgently. There are people here asking questions about you and a child. Journalists, sir. They want to know about scandals involving minors." Ace's blood ran cold. He looked at Deirdre, who couldn't hide a satisfied smile. The phone slipped from Ace's hands, falling to the floor with a dry noise. Journalists. Deirdre had spread the story to the local press, distorting the facts and creating a scandal where there was none. "You did this," he said, staring at his sister-in-law with a mixture of disbelief and fury. "You told the newspapers." "I told the truth," Deirdre replied with false innocence. "A wealthy businessman taking children off the streets without legal authorization. It's a story the public has a right to know." "What truth?" Bernice shouted, unable to contain herself any longer. "The truth is that a good man saved a child from being tortured. The truth," Deirdre said, her eyes gleaming with malice, "is that my brother-in-law has a suspicious behavior with children. Why else would a rich man pick up a strange girl from the streets?" The silence that followed was deafening. Deirdre's insinuation hung in the air like poison, contaminating everything around it. Ace felt nausea rising in his throat. She was suggesting something disgusting, something that would turn his attempt to save a child into something sordid and criminal. "How dare you?" he murmured, his voice trembling with contained anger. "Deirdre," even Meredith said, seeming shocked by what her sister had implied. "That's too much." "Is it?" Deirdre replied, standing up. "Then why is he so desperate to keep the child? Why doesn't he accept that she goes to an appropriate place?" Iris did not fully understand the adult's words, but she understood the tone. There was anger, fear, and something dark that made her want to hide. She approached Bernice, who immediately embraced her protectively. The social worker, Ms. Thompson, seemed extremely uncomfortable with the direction the situation had taken. "Miss Santos, please stick to the facts." "The facts are that I need to protect my family from a scandal," Deirdre said. "And the only way to do that is by removing the source of the problem." At that moment, Ace's phone rang again. This time it was Carl, his sales manager. "Boss, the situation here is getting ugly," Carl said in a low voice. "There's a crowd in front of the main dealership. Some people are shouting horrible things about you and a child. The other customers are leaving." Ace closed his eyes, feeling his world collapsing around him. In a matter of hours, his reputation, built over decades, was being destroyed by his sister-in-law's pure malice. "Carl, close the dealership for today," he said, his voice sounding defeated. "Send everyone home." "Boss, what about the contracts that were about to be signed? Mr. Rodriguez, let's make that Mr. Henderson was going to buy 3 cars today." Forget the contracts, Ace said bitterly. I doubt anyone wants to do business with me after this. When he hung up the phone, he found all eyes fixed on him. Meredith seemed genuinely worried for the first time since it all started. Deirdre was visibly pleased with the chaos she had created, and the social worker nervously checked her watch. Mr. Davenport, Miss Thompson said, in view of the circumstances, perhaps it would be best to resolve this quickly, for the good of everyone. For the good of everyone, Ace repeated bitterly. Including Iris? The girl will be better off in an environment without all this controversy, the social worker said diplomatically. Ace looked at Iris, who was nestled in Bernice's arms. The child watched him with those big, expressive eyes, trusting him to protect her even when everything was falling apart. No, he said firmly. I'm not handing her over. Ace, Meredith said, her voice filled with exasperation, be reasonable. Look what's happening to us. Our reputation, our business, our social life. Everything is being destroyed. And that's more important than a child's life? He asked, staring at his wife. It's important for our survival, Meredith shouted back. Do you think we're going to be able to maintain our standard of living if no one wants to do business with us anymore? Maybe it's time to figure out what really matters in life, Ace said. At that moment, another phone rang. It was Deirdre's cell phone. She answered with a satisfied smile. Hello, Ricardo. Let's change that to Rick, she said into the phone. Yes, he's here. No, he refuses to hand over the child. I know, it's very strange indeed. Ace realized she was talking to someone from the press, narrating the situation in real time as if it were a spectacle for her amusement. Deirdre, hang up that phone, he said, his voice low and threatening. Why? She replied defiantly. The people have a right to know the truth about you. The truth? Ace took a step towards his sister-in-law. The truth is that you are a bitter and envious woman who is using an innocent child to satisfy your thirst for revenge. Revenge? Deirdre laughed. Revenge for what? For having a more successful sister, for living a mediocre life while Meredith had everything you always wanted. You're destroying a child because you can't stand seeing other people happy. The accusation hit the mark. Deirdre's face turned red with anger, and she hung up the phone abruptly. How dare you judge me, she yelled, you who lives in your ivory tower looking down on the world. At least I don't use children as weapons, Ace replied. The discussion was interrupted by the sound of cars stopping in front of the house. Through the window, they could see vans from the local press and people with cameras positioning themselves outside. My God, murmured Meredith, her hands trembling as she opened the curtains. They came here. Iris began to cry as she saw the agitation of the adults. The atmosphere was charged with tension and fear, and she could feel that something terrible was about to happen. Grandma Bernice, she sobbed, I want to get out of here. Where to, honey? Asked Bernice, her heart breaking. Anywhere where nobody yells, the girl replied simply. Iris's innocent answer created a moment of awkward silence. A 6-year-old was asking to flee the house where she should feel safe because the adults couldn't stop arguing. Ms. Thompson, Deirdre said to the social worker, I think you'd better take the child now. Use the back door to avoid the journalists. No, Ace said firmly. If you want to take her, you'll have to go over my dead body. Ace, Meredith said, her voice breaking, please be reasonable. Look at what's happening to us. What's happening, he said, is that I'm discovering who you really are. At that moment, Bernice made a decision that surprised everyone. She picked up Iris in her arms and headed for the stairs. Where do you think you're going? Meredith asked. I'm going to put the girl in the bedroom, Bernice replied firmly, away from all this confusion. A child shouldn't witness adults behaving worse than animals. Bernice, the social worker said, the minor needs to come with me. The minor has a name, Bernice retorted, stopping on the stairs. It's Iris, and she's a 6-year-old who has already suffered more than any human being should suffer. If you have an ounce of decency, you'll stop this argument and think about what's best for her, not what's convenient for you." With those words, Bernice went up the stairs carrying Iris, leaving the adults in silence in the living room. Outside, the noise of the crowd was growing. Ace could hear people shouting his name, some defending him, others condemning him. His private life had become a public spectacle, and at the center of it all was an innocent child who just wanted a safe place to call home. "Mr. Davenport," the social worker said, consulting her watch again, "I need to resolve this now. With each passing minute, the situation gets more complicated for everyone." Ace looked out the window at the crowd outside, then at the stairs where Bernice had taken Iris. He was being forced to choose between protecting a child and protecting the life he had built, and for the first time in his life, the choice was painfully clear. Ace went up the stairs slowly, each step feeling like a mountain. The noise of the crowd outside became more distant, replaced by the muffled sound of sobs coming from the guest room. When he reached the door, he found Bernice sitting on the bed next to Iris, humming a lullaby softly. "How is she?" he asked gently. "Scared," Bernice replied, not stopping stroking the girl's hair. "She doesn't understand why the adults are arguing about her." Iris raised her tear-stained face when she saw Ace. "Uncle Ace, did I do something wrong?" The question broke the businessman's heart. He sat down on the other side of the bed, taking care not to scare the child. "No, little one," he said gently. "You didn't do anything wrong. The adults are making bad choices. But why do they want to take me away? I promise I'll be good, that I won't be any trouble." "Iris," Ace interrupted, his voice choked with emotion, "you're already good. You're the most special child I've ever met." Downstairs they could hear voices rising again. Meredith was yelling at Deirdre, blaming her for taking things too far. The social worker was trying to restore order, threatening to call for reinforcements. "Mr. Davenport," Bernice said in a low voice, "there's something I need to tell you. About Iris's grandmother." "Grandma Betty?" Iris asked, her eyes lighting up for the first time that day. "Yes, sweetie," Bernice said affectionately. "Do you remember where she worked?" "At the school," Iris replied. "She taught the children to read and write." Bernice looked at Ace. "Sir, my sister-in-law works cleaning at the municipal school. She told me that teacher Betty had a special project. She taught underprivileged children in a small room that the church lent her." "And what happened to that project?" Ace asked, sensing that there was something important in that information. "When she passed away, the project stopped. But Father Isidoro, let's say Father Michael, still keeps all the materials, books, pictures, educational toys, all donated by teacher Betty herself." Ace was thoughtful. "Do you think the priest would be able to tell me more about Iris's situation? Documents, relatives, anything?" "Maybe," Bernice said hopefully. "It's worth a try." At that moment, heavy footsteps went up the stairs. It was the social worker, accompanied by Meredith. "Mr. Davenport," Ms. Thompson said firmly, "I can't wait any longer. The minor needs to come with me now." "Her name is Iris," Ace said, standing up and positioning himself protectively between the social worker and the child. "Sir, please don't make this more difficult than it already is," the woman insisted. "There is protocol to be followed." "And there's a real child with real feelings," Ace replied. "She's not a protocol." Iris clung to Bernice's arm, her huge eyes darting between the adults. "Grandma Bernice, I don't want to go. Please don't let them take me." "Honey," Bernice began, but her voice failed. "Ms. Thompson," Meredith said impatiently, "enough drama. Take the child and let's resolve this once and for all." "No!" Iris screamed, her voice small but fierce. "I'm not going! You can't force me!" The child's emotional outburst silenced everyone in the room. Iris was standing on the bed, her fists clenched, tears streaming down her face, but with an impressive determination for someone 6 years old. "I've already lived in a bad place," she continued, sobbing. "I know what it's like." They hit the children. They don't give them food. They do bad things. I'm not going. Iris, nobody's going to hit you. The social worker tried to reassure her. The shelter is a safe place. Lies, the girl screamed. All adults lie. Only Uncle Ace and Grandma Bernice don't lie. The desperation in Iris's voice was so pure and real that even Meredith seemed shaken. For the first time, she was seeing not a generic street kid, but a real girl, with real fears and real tears. Ace, she murmured, she's so scared. That's what I've been trying to bring to your attention since yesterday, he replied, without taking his eyes off Iris. At that moment, the sound of sirens echoed down the street. Through the window, they could see a police car arriving. The situation had escalated beyond any control. My God, whispered Bernice. They called the police. Deirdre appeared in the doorway, a satisfied smile on her face. Problem solved. Now you have no choice. You're a terrible person, Ace said, staring at his sister-in-law. A truly terrible person. I'm realistic, Deirdre replied, something you clearly aren't. Iris began to hyperventilate, panicking as she heard the sirens. Her experiences on the streets had taught her that the police rarely brought good things to children like her. Grandma Bernice, she cried, are they going to arrest me? Did I do something wrong? No, my love, Bernice said, embracing the girl. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why is there police? The innocent question had no easy answer. How to explain to a 6-year-old that the adults had created a situation so complicated that they needed to call the police? Ms. Thompson, Ace said desperately, give me an hour to talk to Father Michael, to see if we can get any information about Iris's legal situation. Mr. Davenport, that's not going to change anything, the social worker replied. Even if we find relatives, you don't have legal authorization to care for her. But I can start the correct process, he insisted, with the proper guidance, with the right papers. Ace, Meredith said. You heard what she said. Even doing everything right, it could take months. Do you want our life to be this hell for months? If it's necessary to protect Iris, yes, he replied without hesitation. Well, Meredith said coldly, then you're going to do it alone. What do you mean? I mean that if you choose this child, you'll be choosing against me, against our marriage, our life together, our future. The ultimatum hung in the air like a death sentence. 18 years of marriage summed up in an impossible choice, his wife or an orphaned child he had found by chance. Meredith, he said softly, don't force me to make that choice. You already made the choice, she replied. The moment you brought that child into our house, you chose. Downstairs they heard the sound of the front door opening. Deep male voices echoed through the house. The police had entered. Police! We need to get this sorted out, a stern voice shouted. Iris began to tremble violently in Bernice's arms. They're going to take me, she whispered. They always take the kids. Ace looked at the girl he had rescued just 2 days ago, seeing in her not just a frightened child, but a person who had trusted him to protect her. He looked at Meredith, the woman he had loved for nearly 2 decades, but who now seemed like a cold and calculating stranger. The choice he had avoided for 2 days had finally arrived, and this time there was no avoiding it. Mr. Davenport! A police officer shouted from below. We need to talk to you. Ace, Meredith said, reaching out her hand. Come with me, let's resolve this like responsible adults. Uncle Ace, Iris whispered, you promised you'd protect me. 2 hands outstretched. 2 different promises. 2 lives that would never be the same, regardless of the choice he made, and time had run out. Ace closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When he opened them, his decision was made. He crouched down in front of Iris, taking her small hands in his. Iris, he said in a firm voice, I'm going to go downstairs and talk to the police officers, but I promise I won't let anyone take you to a place where you don't want to be. Do you really promise? She asked, her eyes shining with a fragile hope. I promise, he said, kissing the girl's forehead. Bernice will stay here with you." Meredith scoffed in disbelief. "Ace, you can't promise something you can't deliver." He stood up and faced his wife. "I can and I will deliver, even if it means losing everything we've built together." "So that's it?" Meredith asked, her words sharp as razors. 18 years of marriage are worth less than a child you've known for 2 days. "Meredith," Ace said sadly, "I've discovered that I don't know the woman I've been married to for 18 years. The woman I loved would never put a helpless child in danger for social appearances. And I've discovered that my husband is a pathetic dreamer who doesn't understand how the real world works," she retorted venomously. Ace left the room without responding, leaving Meredith with her bitterness. He walked downstairs slowly, preparing himself for the battle of his life. In the living room, he found 2 uniformed police officers, Ms. Thompson, still with her malicious smile, and a man he didn't know, a grey-haired gentleman wearing a black cassock. "Father Michael?" Ace asked, surprised. "Mr. Davenport," Father Michael said, extending his hand. "I heard about what's happening and came to see if I can help." "Father," said the sergeant, a robust, middle-aged man, "do you know this child?" "Yes, I do," Father Michael replied in a calm voice. "Iris was the granddaughter of Betty Santos, one of the best teachers this town has ever had. A blessed woman who dedicated her life to educating underprivileged children." "And what happened to this teacher?" asked the officer, making notes. "Betty passed away 3 years ago," explained the father. "Sudden heart attack. Iris was with her when it happened. The girl was left alone, with no one else in the world." Deirdre spoke up quickly. "See? The child is an orphan after all. She needs to go to a suitable institution." "With all due respect, madam," said Father Michael, looking directly at Deirdre, "Betty once told me that she would rather see her granddaughter on the streets than in some of these places that call themselves suitable." "Father," Ms. Thompson intervened, "you can't disqualify municipal institutions without knowledge of the facts." "I can," replied the father firmly, "because I've visited the Harmony County Children's Shelter where they intend to put Iris. I saw malnourished, traumatized, neglected children. I saw employees who shouldn't be near children for even 5 minutes." The sergeant frowned. "Father, these are serious accusations. These are observations from someone who dedicates his life to the pastoral care of this community," replied the father. "And as a representative of the church, I have a duty to speak for the protection of the most vulnerable." Ace felt a spark of hope igniting in his chest. "Father Michael, is there any documentation about Iris? Birth certificate? Anything that proves her situation?" "Yes, there is," said the father, taking some papers from a folder. "Betty was very organized. I kept all her important documents, including Iris's birth certificate." The social worker took the papers eagerly, examining them with professional attention. "These documents seem to be in order," she admitted reluctantly. "And there's more," continued the father. "Betty left an informal testamentary letter, written in her own hand, expressing her wish that Iris be cared for by a loving family, not by institutions." "That has no legal value," said Deirdre quickly. "It may not have legal value," agreed the father, "but it has moral value, and sometimes moral value is more important than the cold letter of the law." The sergeant, who had remained silent observing the discussion, finally spoke. "Mr. Davenport, can you explain to me exactly how you found this child?" Ace related the whole story: the shouts in the vacant lot, the cruel teenagers, the anthill, the deplorable state in which he found Iris. The officer made detailed notes, occasionally shaking his head in disapproval. "And these teenagers?" asked the sergeant. "Would you recognize them?" "Yes, for sure," Ace replied. "Why?" "Because what they did is a crime," said the officer gravely. "Torture against a minor, mistreatment. If we can identify them, they can be held criminally liable." Deirdre seemed bothered by this revelation. "But that's secondary," she said. "The important thing is to resolve the child's situation now." "Actually," said the sergeant, looking at her suspiciously. "The criminal situation is very relevant. It shows that Mr. Davenport acted in legitimate defense of a third party, saving a child from a situation of real and immediate danger." Deirdre's satisfied expression began to crumble. She had not expected the criminal aspect to favor Ace. "Sergeant," said the social worker, "that doesn't change the fact that Mr. Davenport doesn't have legal authorization to care for the minor." "True," agreed the officer, "but it also doesn't change the fact that he saved a child from torture. In my experience, people who torture children for fun don't stop at the first time." At that moment, Bernice came down the stairs carrying Iris in her arms. The girl had insisted on coming down to see what was happening, and Bernice didn't have the courage to leave her alone with so much fear. When Iris saw Father Michael, her eyes lit up. "Father!" she shouted, reaching out her arms. The father smiled and took the girl in his arms. "Hello, my little Iris. How are you?" "Scared," she replied honestly. "They want to take me away from Uncle Ace." "And do you want to stay with Uncle Ace?" asked the father gently. "Yes. He and Grandma Bernice take good care of me. They give me food. They let me sleep in a real bed and no one hits me." The child's simple words echoed through the room, creating an embarrassing silence. The sergeant looked at the social worker, then at Deirdre, clearly bothered by the situation. "Ma'am," he said to Miss Thompson, "what exactly is the rush to remove this child from a home where she is clearly well cared for and happy?" "Protocol," she replied, but her voice sounded less convinced. "Protocol," repeated the sergeant. "And where exactly do you intend to take her?" "To the Harmony County Children's Shelter. The same shelter about which the father here has made serious accusations of neglect." The social worker hesitated. "These are just unproven allegations." "Sergeant," said the father, "may I suggest a temporary solution?" "I'm listening." "How about giving Mr. Davenport a deadline to regularize the situation? Say 2 weeks to file for temporary custody, undergo psychological evaluation, complete all the necessary legal procedures." "And if I don't agree?" asked the social worker. "Then," said the sergeant, "I'm going to have to investigate more deeply the conditions of the Harmony County Children's Shelter, and I can guarantee that if I find evidence of the irregularities that the father mentioned, there will be legal consequences for whoever is responsible." Ms. Thompson paled. That's not necessary." 2 weeks," said the father again. "It's enough time to resolve everything legally, and Iris stays safe with people who clearly care about her." Deirdre, realizing that she was losing control of the situation, made one last desperate attempt. "Sergeant, don't you think it's strange that a rich man has so much interest in a street child?" The silence that followed was tense. The sergeant looked at Deirdre with an expression that mixed disgust and disbelief. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "in my 20-year career I've learned to recognize people who mistreat children, and I can guarantee that Mr. Davenport is not one of them. Now you, on the other hand—" "What does that mean?" asked Deirdre, alarmed. "It means," said the sergeant, "that I'm going to investigate who spread these malicious accusations to the press. Defamation and slander are also crimes." Deirdre turned livid. Her revenge was turning against her own, and for the first time since she arrived, she seemed genuinely scared. 2 weeks, said the father once again. "It's a fair solution for everyone." The sergeant looked at Iris, who was watching everything attentively, still in the father's arms. "What do you think, little one? Do you want to stay with Uncle Ace for 2 more weeks?" "Forever," she replied immediately, causing soft laughter even from the social worker. "Let's start with 2 weeks, said the sergeant, smiling. 2 weeks. Ace had 2 weeks to regularize a situation that seemed impossible while his personal and professional life crumbled around him. The crowd outside the house had dispersed after the police left, but the damage was already done. Social media was seething with speculation and malicious comments about the rich businessman and the street child. After everyone left, Meredith came down the stairs with 2 suitcases in her hands. She wore a traveling suit and her eyes were red, but her posture remained rigid and determined. "Where are you going?" asked Ace, even though he already knew the answer. "To Belém, to stay with Deirdre for a while," she replied coldly. "Until you resolve this situation and get back to normal." "Meredith, we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," she interrupted. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." Iris was hiding behind Bernice, watching the scene with big, scared eyes. She might not fully understand what was happening, but she knew that it was because of her that the woman in the pretty dress was leaving. "Is it my fault?" she asked in a tiny voice to Bernice. "No, my love," replied the housekeeper, hugging the girl. "Sometimes adults make decisions that have nothing to do with children." Meredith stopped at the door, looking one last time at Ace. 18 years, Ace. 18 years of my life. I hope it's worth it." The door closed with a final sound, and for the first time in almost 2 decades, Ace was alone in his own house. Well, not exactly alone. There were Bernice and Iris, who became his new makeshift family. "Mr. Davenport," said Bernice softly, "are you all right?" He sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the decision he had made. "I am, Bernice. Maybe for the first time in years, I'm really all right." In the following days, Ace's life changed completely. Sales at the dealerships plummeted drastically. Old clients cancelled deals, suppliers demanded cash payment, and employees whispered in the hallways. His reputation, built over decades, was in ruins. "Mr. Davenport," said Carl, his sales manager, during a tense meeting, "we need to talk about the finances. This month we sold only 3 cars. Last month we sold 30. "What about the other dealerships?" asked Ace, leafing through desolate reports. "The situation is similar. People are avoiding doing business with us. Some clients openly said they don't want to associate with, well, with someone involved in scandal." Ace closed his eyes, calculating quickly. With this drop in sales, he would have to sell at least 2 of the 5 dealerships to keep the others running and pay the employees. "Carl, prepare the documentation to sell the units on Main Street and downtown," he said finally. "Sir, are you sure? Those are our most profitable units." "Were," Ace corrected bitterly. "Now they're just reminders of how a life can change in a matter of days." Meanwhile, at home, Iris was blossoming in ways that no one expected. Away from the constant tension of the streets, her true personality was emerging. She was incredibly intelligent, with an impressive photographic memory and an insatiable curiosity about everything around her. "Uncle Ace," she said one night during dinner, "why are you always sad now?" The child's direct question caught him off guard. "I'm not sad, little one." "You are," she insisted, "and I know it's because of me. People don't like you anymore because you saved me." Ace stopped eating, looking at that 6-year-old girl who demonstrated a disturbing maturity. "Iris, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. You are the best thing that has happened in my life. If people don't like me for saving you, then those people aren't worth it." "But you're losing money," she observed. "Grandma Bernice explained to me that when people don't buy your cars, you run out of money." "The money comes back," said Ace. "But a special child like you, that's a priceless treasure." Iris smiled for the first time in days, and Ace felt that all the losses were worth it just to see that smile. In the following week, Ace officially started the custody application process. It was a bureaucratic nightmare that involved dozens of forms, medical exams, psychological evaluations, and home visits. Each day was a new humiliation, each civil servant a new barrier to be overcome. "Mr. Davenport," said the psychologist responsible for the evaluation, "I need to ask about your motivation to adopt a child at this stage of your life." "I'm not adopting," he corrected. "I'm applying for custody of a child I saved from a dangerous situation." "Yes, but why take on this responsibility? Wouldn't it be simpler to let specialized professionals take care of her?" Ace thought about the question, remembering the first days with Iris, how she had transformed his empty house into a home full of life. "Doctor," he said finally, "when I found Iris, she was being tortured for fun. At that moment I realized that I had spent years living an empty life, focused only on money and status. Taking care of her gave me a purpose that I didn't even know I was looking for." The psychologist made notes. "And your wife? How does she feel about this decision?" "My wife left me," Ace said simply. "She chose our social reputation. I chose Iris. Doesn't that worry you?" "The family instability?" "Doctor, Iris spent 3 years living on the streets, facing dangers that we can't even imagine. If she managed to survive that, we can both overcome any instability." During these evaluations, Iris also went through sessions with child psychologists. The sessions revealed the true emotional state of the child and the deep trauma she carried. "Mr. Davenport," said Dr. Mariana Costa, after a particularly difficult session, "Iris has clear signs of post-traumatic stress. She still wakes up screaming some nights, has recurring nightmares, and shows signs of severe anxiety when separated from you or Bernice." "Is that permanent?" asked Ace, worried. "It can be treated with therapy and lots of love," replied the psychologist. "But it will take time, a lot of time." "Are you prepared for that?" "I'm prepared for whatever it takes," he said without hesitation. Meanwhile, the financial situation continued to deteriorate. Ace had to sell another dealership and lay off half the employees. His luxurious house began to seem too empty and too expensive to maintain. "Mr. Davenport," said Bernice one night, "can I make a suggestion?" "Of course, Bernice." "Have you thought about selling this house and buying something smaller? More cozy for Iris?" Ace looked around the huge room with its expensive furniture and impeccable decor that Meredith had chosen. The house really was too big for 3 people, and it carried too many memories of a marriage that had ended. "You know what, Bernice? You're right. This house is from a life that no longer exists." The next day, Ace put the house up for sale and began looking for something smaller, more modest, more suitable for his new reality. It was during this search that he discovered something that would completely change his plans. Father Michael approached him with an unexpected proposal. "Ace," said the father during a visit, "remember the project that Betty kept for underprivileged children?" "Yes, Bernice told me about it." "Well, I have all the materials stored at the church, books, paintings, educational toys, all donated by Betty herself. And I have an idea." "What kind of idea?" "How about we reactivate the project? There are many children in the community who need basic education, literacy, care, and you have business experience to organize something bigger." Ace was thoughtful. The idea was interesting, but he was facing severe financial difficulties. "Father, the idea is good, but I don't know if I have the resources to fund a social project now." "You don't have to fund it alone," said the father with a smile. "There are people in the community willing to help, and who knows, maybe it's a way to rebuild your reputation by doing something genuinely good." That night, Ace talked about the idea with Bernice and Iris. "What do you think, little one?" he asked. "How about we help other children like your grandma Betty used to do?" Iris's eyes lit up for the first time in weeks. "Can we teach them to read, like Grandma did with me?" "We can teach them many things," said Ace, feeling a spark of hope igniting in his chest. Maybe there was a way to rebuild his life that honored both his new family and the memory of Iris's grandmother. The idea of the social project began to take shape more quickly than Ace had imagined. At the end of the first week after the conversation with Father Michael, he had already sold his luxurious house and bought a smaller property in downtown Harmony Creek, a 3-bedroom ranch house with a spacious backyard, perfect for his new life with Iris and Bernice. "Is this where we're going to live?" asked Iris, exploring the empty rooms of the new house excitedly. "Yes," replied Ace, watching how the girl seemed happier in that simple space than she had ever seemed in the mansion. What do you think?" "I like it. It's just the right size for a family," she said, running to the backyard where there was a century-old mango tree. "Look, Uncle Ace, it's just like the tree where Grandma Betty and I used to sit and read." Iris's observation touched Ace deeply. Maybe there was something providential about that change, as if they were being guided to rebuild their lives in the right place. While settling into the new house, Ace continued to face the bureaucratic challenges of the custody process. Each day brought new demands, new forms, new humiliations from civil servants who treated him with suspicion and disdain. "Mr. Davenport," said the social worker responsible for the case during one of the home visits, "I need to question the stability of the environment that you are offering for the minor." "What do you mean?" asked Ace, genuinely confused. "You sold your house. You're going through financial difficulties. Your wife abandoned you. That doesn't suggest a stable environment for a child. It suggests an environment where a child is more important than material goods," replied Ace, beginning to lose patience with the constant insinuations. "Sir, please remain calm," said the woman, making notes. "I'm just doing my job." "Your job is to protect children," said Bernice, who couldn't stay silent any longer. "Iris was being tortured on the streets, and now she's happy, healthy, attending school, being loved. How is that not stable?" The social worker ignored Bernice and continued her questions. "Mr. Davenport, what is your current income?" "I still have 2 dealerships running," he replied. "It's enough to support my family." "But significantly less than before, correct?" "Correct, but Iris doesn't need imported cars or designer clothes to be happy. She needs love, care, and security." During this visit, Iris remained in the room, but managed to hear part of the conversation. Later, when the social worker left, she approached Ace with a worried expression. "Uncle Ace, are you poor because of me?" she asked directly. "Iris, money isn't everything in life," replied he, crouching down to be at the girl's height. "But the lady said that you had more money before you met me. That's true, but you know what else I had before I met you. An empty life. A big cold house where no one laughed, no one played, no one really cared about each other. And now I have a daughter who teaches me something new every day. I have a house where you can hear laughter. I have a real family." Iris hugged Ace tightly. "I like you better poor and happy than rich and sad." That week, Ace made a decision that surprised even Bernice. He used the money from the sale of the house to buy a small commercial building in the center of town, near the church where Father Michael kept Betty's materials. "Mr. Davenport," said Bernice, "what do you intend to do with this?" "The educational center we talked about," he replied, observing the abandoned building that needed a lot of work. "We're going to transform this into a place where children like Iris can learn, play, be safe." The news of the purchase of the building quickly reached the ears of the entire town. The reactions were mixed. Some admired the initiative, others suspected Ace's motives. "Another maneuver to clean up his image," commented Deirdre when she heard the news during a call to Meredith. "He thinks he can buy his reputation back." But there were those who saw the situation differently. Raimunda, Bernice's friend who had worked with Betty, was one of the first to offer help. "Bernice," she said during a visit, "if Mr. Davenport really wants to honor the memory of teacher Betty, he can count on me. I know other people who would also like to help." Gradually, a small group of volunteers began to form. They were simple people from the community, former students of Betty, parents of underprivileged children, retired teachers who wanted to contribute to local education. "Ms. Raimunda," said Iris during one of the planning meetings, "did you know my grandma?" "Yes, my dear," replied the woman with affection. "Your grandma was a very special person. She said that each child is a hidden treasure waiting to be discovered." "She did say that," exclaimed Iris, excited. "And she said that when we learn to read, we can travel to any place in the world without leaving home." Iris's words moved everyone present. It was as if Betty's wisdom was being transmitted through her granddaughter, keeping alive the teacher's passion for education. While the project of the educational centre took shape, Iris's legal situation finally began to be resolved. The last psychological evaluation had been positive. The home visits showed a healthy and loving environment, and even the most skeptical social worker had to admit that the girl was thriving. "Mr. Davenport," she said during the last official visit, "I must admit that I was surprised. Iris shows clear signs of emotional recovery and healthy adaptation. Does that mean that custody will be approved?" asked Ace, trying not to show anxiety. "It means that I will recommend approval," she replied. "The process still needs to go through the judge, but with all the positive evaluations, I see no impediments." That night, Ace, Bernice and Iris celebrated with a simple pizza in the backyard of the new house. It was a modest celebration compared to Ace's old standards, but infinitely more meaningful. "Uncle Ace," said Iris while watching the stars, "when I grow up, I'm going to work at the Betty's Centre too." "And what are you going to teach the children?" he asked. "I'm going to teach them not to be afraid," she replied with conviction. "I'm going to teach them that even when bad things happen, good people can always show up later." Iris's words touched Ace deeply. At 6 years old, she already understood lessons about life that many adults took decades to learn. A week later, when they least expected it, they received an unexpected visit. Meredith was at the door, too thin, with deep, dark circles under her eyes and an expression of tiredness that Ace had never seen before. "Hi," she said simply. "Meredith," replied Ace, surprised. "Come in." She hesitated on the doorstep, observing the simple but cozy house. "It's very different from our old house." "It's smaller," he agreed, "but it's more of a home." Iris appeared in the room, coming from the kitchen where she was helping Bernice prepare lunch. When she saw Meredith, she stopped immediately, remembering the last time the two met. "Hi," said Iris timidly. "Hi, Iris," replied Meredith, her voice softer than Ace remembered. You've grown." "Just a little," said the girl. "Do you want to see my room? Uncle Ace painted it blue because I like that color." Iris's innocent offer left Meredith visibly moved. I'd like that very much." While Iris showed the house to Meredith, Ace watched his ex-wife attentively. There was something different about her, a fragility that didn't exist before. "Meredith," he said when they were alone, "why did you come back?" "Because I discovered that spending 3 weeks listening to Deirdre speak badly of you made me realize some things," she replied, avoiding looking directly at him. "What kind of things?" "That maybe you're not crazy. That maybe I'm the one who was wrong." It was the closest admission to an apology that Ace had heard from Meredith in years of marriage. But he also knew that the damage was already done, and that some decisions couldn't be undone. "Meredith, I know," she interrupted. "I know it's too late, but I needed to tell you that you did the right thing. And Iris, she's a special child." "She is," agreed Ace. "The most special child I've ever met." Meredith stayed only a few hours, enough time to see how Iris had transformed that house into a home full of life and joy. When she left, there was no more bitterness in her eyes, just a deep sadness for what she had lost for pride and vanity. That night, Iris asked a question that caught Ace off guard. "Uncle Ace, do you still love Aunt Meredith?" "Why do you ask that, little one?" "Because she looked sad when she left." "And you look sad too." Ace thought carefully about the answer. "Sometimes, little one, the people we love make choices that hurt us. And even when we forgive, some things can't be fixed. Like when a vase breaks." "Exactly. You can glue the pieces, but the cracks will always be there." Iris nodded, demonstrating once again her precocious wisdom. "But sometimes," she said, "the glued vases are prettier than before, because the cracks make different designs." Iris's observation made Ace smile. Maybe she was right. Maybe his broken life could be rebuilt in an even more beautiful way. 6 months after Ace first heard Iris's cries, the Betty's Hope Educational Center was almost ready to be inaugurated. The building that once housed an abandoned building supply store had been transformed into a colorful and welcoming space, with classrooms adapted for different ages, a small but well-organized library, and a patio where children could play safely. "Uncle Ace, look!" shouted Iris, running around the newly painted patio. "The children will be able to play tag here." Ace smiled, watching how the girl had become an integral part of the project. Iris, now officially 7 years old and legally under his guardianship, showed an infectious enthusiasm for helping other children who had gone through similar hardships to her own. "Mr. Davenport," said Raimonda, approaching with a list in her hands, "we already have 15 children enrolled for the first class, and 3 volunteers confirmed to help with the lessons." "Excellent," he replied, checking the last details of the renovation and the materials that Father Michael kept from Teacher Betty. "They are all organized in the library," said Bernice, who had become the unofficial coordinator of the center. "Books, educational games, art supplies." It's impressive how she had collected so many things over the years. That afternoon, while checking the final preparations, Ace received an unexpected visit. Carl, his former sales manager, appeared at the center accompanied by a man he didn't know. "Mr. Davenport," said Carl, looking nervous, "this is Mr. Henderson from Henderson Construction." Ace knew the company's reputation, one of the largest in the region, specializing in large developments. "How can I help you?" "Actually," said Henderson, a middle-aged man with a prosperous appearance, "we're the ones who would like to help you." "How so?" "Mr. Davenport, the whole town is talking about your project," explained Henderson. "And after seeing in person what you're building here, my company would like to make a donation." Ace was surprised. A donation. $50,000 to help with the operational costs of the first year, said Henderson. "My youngest daughter is the age of Iris, and when she heard your story, well, my wife insisted that we do our part." The offer left Ace speechless. In recent months, he had become accustomed to rejection and suspicion. Receiving genuine support was something he had almost forgotten could happen. "Mr. Henderson, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," replied the man. "Just keep doing what you're doing." After the visitors left, Iris approached Ace with a thoughtful expression. "Uncle Ace, why does he want to give us money?" "Because there are good people in the world, little one," he replied. "People who want to help other people do good things, like you helped me." "Exactly. And like your grandma Betty helped other children." Iris smiled, running back to where she was helping Bernice organize the books in the library. Ace watched her, still impressed with how that child had transformed not only his life, but was inspiring other people to do good. A week before the official opening of the center, Ace received a call that changed everything once again. It was from his lawyer, Bob Silverman. "Ace, I need to tell you some news," said Bob. "First, the good news. The judge officially approved your permanent guardianship of Iris. The papers are ready for signature." "Bob, that's wonderful," exclaimed Ace, feeling a huge weight leaving his shoulders. "But there's something more," continued the lawyer. "Something you need to know about Iris's past." "What did you find out?" "I found more information about Teacher Betty and about her connection to you." "Connection to me?" "Ace, you studied at municipal school when you were a child, right?" "Yes, from 1st to 4th grade." "Why?" "Betty Santos was your 2nd grade teacher. I found your old school records." Ace was silent, processing the information. Iris's grandmother had been his teacher decades ago. How had he not remembered her? "Bob, are you sure about this?" "Absolutely. And there's more. I found a personal diary of hers among the belongings that the father kept. Ace, she wrote about you." "About me?" "About a special student she had in the 2nd grade." A boy named Ace, who was very shy but extremely kind. She wrote that that boy would one day do great things for the world. The shock of the revelation left Ace dizzy. Betty had been his teacher. She had believed in him as a child. And decades later, in some mysterious way, she had sent him her granddaughter so that he could repay all the love and care he had received. "Bob, can you bring that diary here?" "Sure. But Ace, there's still one last thing. And this may be the most important of all." "What is it?" "Iris is not just Betty's granddaughter. Betty informally adopted her when the girl was 2 years old. Iris's biological parents died in an accident, and Betty, who was a friend of the family, took care of the child." "You mean that—" "It means that Iris was also adopted out of love, not by blood. Exactly like you're doing now." That night, Ace told Iris about the discovery. The girl listened to everything attentively, her big eyes processing each piece of information. "So, Grandma Betty knew you when you were little like me?" she asked. "Yes, she did. And apparently, she believed that I could do good things." "And you can," said Iris matter-of-factly. "You saved me. And now you're saving other children." "We're saving other children," corrected Ace. "You're my partner in this project." "Uncle Ace," said Iris suddenly, "do you think Grandma Betty knew that one day you were going to find me?" The child's question made Ace think. There were so many coincidences, so many signs that seemed to have been orchestrated by a greater force. Finding Iris exactly when she needed salvation, discovering the connection with Betty, the educational center that was honoring her memory. "You know what, little one? I think your grandmother was a very wise person. Maybe she did know." In the week of the inauguration of the Betty's Hope Educational Center, something unexpected happened. Meredith appeared again, but this time she wasn't alone. She was accompanied by Deirdre, who looked extremely uncomfortable. "Ace," said Meredith, "Deirdre has something to tell you." Deirdre avoided looking directly at him. I want to apologize," she said, the words coming out with difficulty, "for what I did, for the lies I spread." "What made you change your mind?" asked Ace, genuinely curious. "I saw what you built here," she replied, looking around the center. "I saw how Iris blossomed, and I realized that I was moved by envy, not by concern." "Deirdre," said Iris, approaching the woman who had tried to separate her from Ace, "do you want to see the center? I can show you where we're going to teach the children to read." The child's generosity in the face of who had tried to harm her left Deirdre visibly moved. I'd like that very much, Iris." While Iris showed the center to Deirdre, Meredith approached Ace. "I wanted to be here at the inauguration," she said, "if you allow it." "Of course," replied Ace. "The more people supporting the project, the better." "Ace," she said hesitantly, "are you happy?" "I am," he replied honestly. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be. Even with all the losses, the money, the companies, our previous life?" "Meredith, I discovered that none of that was really mine. They were just things I owned. Iris taught me the difference between having and being." Meredith nodded sadly. "It took me too long to learn that lesson, and when I learned it, it was too late." "It's never too late to start over," said Ace gently. "Iris is living proof of that. On the day of the inauguration, more than 100 people showed up to see the Betty's Hope Educational Center. There were entire families, curious children, local business people, and even the mayor of the town. "Ladies and gentlemen," said Ace during the opening ceremony, "this center is not mine. It belongs to all the children of Harmony Creek who need an opportunity. It is a legacy of teacher Betty Santos, a woman who dedicated her life to believing in the potential of every child." "And it's a gift from Iris to other children," shouted someone from the crowd, making everyone laugh and applaud. Iris, wearing a new blue dress for the occasion, cut the inaugural ribbon next to Ace. When the doors opened and the first children came running into the center, their cries of joy echoed throughout the street. That night, after everyone had left, Ace and Iris sat on the center's patio, watching the stars over Harmony Creek. "Uncle Ace," said Iris, "do you think Grandma Betty is proud of us?" "I'm sure she is, little one," he replied, hugging his daughter from the heart. "I'm absolutely sure she is." 3 months after the inauguration of the Betty's Hope Educational Center, Ace's life had found a completely new rhythm. Every morning, he and Iris walked together to the center where she attended regular classes while he coordinated the administrative activities. It was a simple routine, but filled with purpose and joy. "Daddy Ace," said Iris one morning during breakfast, using for the first time the term that she had begun to use spontaneously in recent weeks. "Can I help teach the younger boys today?" Ace's heart warmed at hearing Daddy. "Of course you can, little one. What do you want to teach them?" "I want to teach them how not to be afraid," she replied, chewing on a slice of bread and butter that Bernice had prepared. "Many of them are still scared, just like I used to be." At 7 years old, Iris had become a kind of natural leader among the children at the center. Her own experience of overcoming hardship made her especially able to understand and help other children who arrived traumatized. "You know, Iris," said Bernice, serving more milk to the girl, "your Grandma Betty always said that the people who have gone through difficulties are the best teachers for those who are going through the same difficulties." "She did say that?" asked Iris, excited. "She did, and she was right." That morning, when they arrived at the center, they found an unexpected situation. There was a woman at the door, holding the hand of a boy of approximately 5 years, who was crying compulsively. "Please," the woman was saying to Raimunda, who was trying to calm her down, "I need help. I don't know what else to do with him." Ace approached. "Good morning. I'm Ace Davenport. How can I help you?" "My name is Socorro," said the woman, visibly exhausted. "This is my grandson Pedrinho. His parents died in an accident 6 months ago. Since then, he doesn't speak, doesn't eat right, has nightmares every night." The boy hid behind his grandmother, trembling. Iris approached slowly, crouching down to be at his height. "Hi," she said softly. "My name is Iris. What's yours?" The boy didn't answer, but stopped crying for a moment to look at her. "You don't need to talk if you don't want to," continued Iris. "I didn't talk either when I was scared. But here is a safe place. No one is going to hurt you." There was something in Iris's voice, in the way she spoke, that immediately touched the boy. Maybe it was because she really understood what he was feeling. "Mrs. Socorro," said Ace, "the center has a special program for children who have experienced trauma. Iris here is our expert in helping other children feel safe again." "Expert?" Socorro looked at Iris with surprise. "But she's so small." "Sometimes," said Bernice, "children understand other children better than adults." That day, Iris spent hours with Pedrinho, simply sitting next to him, sometimes talking, sometimes remaining silent. Gradually, the boy began to relax in her presence. "Iris," said Pedrinho suddenly, his first word in weeks, "did you also lose your mommy?" "I did," replied Iris honestly. "I lost my mommy and my daddy, and my grandma too. But then I found a new family who loves me very much. Do you think I'm going to find a new family too?" "You already have a new family," said Iris, pointing to Socorro. "Your grandma loves you very much, and now you have us too." The conversation between the two children deeply touched all the adults present. Socorro began to cry with relief at seeing her grandson finally interacting with someone. That late afternoon, while tidying up the center to close, Ace reflected on how Iris had naturally assumed a role of caregiver for the other children. "Bernice," he said, "have you noticed how Iris has an ease in helping other children?" "I have," replied the housekeeper. "It's a rare gift. She has genuine compassion without judgment." "You know what I'm thinking. Maybe we should formalize this. Create a program where children who have overcome trauma help others who are still going through difficulties." "An excellent idea," agreed Bernice. And Iris would be perfect to lead something like that. 2 weeks later, the Heart Friend program was officially launched at the center. Iris, despite being only 7 years old, became the first official mini-mentor, helping other traumatized children adapt and feel safe. The idea attracted the attention of the local press, but this time in a positive way. Journalists came to do stories about the businessman boy who had lost everything to save a child and ended up creating a revolutionary social project. "Mr. Davenport," asked a journalist during an interview, "do you regret making the choices you made?" "Never," replied Ace without hesitation. "I lost money, properties, a marriage. But I gained a daughter, a purpose, and the chance to make a real difference in the lives of other people." "And Iris, how do you feel being a mentor to other children?" "I like it," replied Iris simply. "When you help someone not be afraid anymore, you also get less scared." The story aired on local television and generated repercussions throughout the state of Ohio. Donations began to arrive from various cities. Volunteers offered to replicate the project in other locations, and the Betty's Hope Center became a reference in education and child recovery. But it wasn't all roses. The success of the project also brought new challenges. Ace discovered that managing a social center was much more complex than managing car dealerships. "Mr. Davenport," said Ramunda during an administrative meeting, "we have a waiting list of 60 children. But our space only accommodates 30. "And the financial resources?" he asked. "With the donations we receive, we can maintain the current activities for another 6 months. After that, we will need more support." Ace sighed. Even with all the success, the financial sustainability of the project was a constant concern. His 2 remaining dealerships were recovering slowly, but they still weren't generating enough profit to finance the necessary expansion. That night, he discussed the problem with Iris during dinner. "Daddy," she said, "what if we asked more people for help, like we did with Mr. Henderson?" "That's an idea, honey, but it's not easy to convince people to donate money." "But they see that it works," Iris insisted. "Padrino is smiling now. Maria Clara is talking again. Joan doesn't have nightmares anymore. If people see that, they'll want to help." Iris's simple logic made Ace think. Maybe the solution was to show the project's results more clearly, to make the impact more visible to the community. "You know what, Iris? You're right. Let's organize a presentation where the children themselves show how they're progressing." A week later, Achievement Day was organized at the center. Children who had arrived, traumatized and silent, were now singing, reciting poetry, showing drawings, and telling their stories of overcoming adversity. Padrino, who had arrived mute from trauma, recited a short poem he had written about his new family at the center. Maria Clara, an 8-year-old girl who had been abused and wouldn't speak to anyone, sang a song that Iris had taught her. João, 6 years old, showed his drawings where his family always appeared smiling. The audience, made up of parents, local business owners, municipal authorities and journalists, was visibly moved. Many openly wept as they saw the transformation of those children. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ace said at the end of the presentation, "you have just seen what is possible when a community decides to invest in the future of its children. Every dollar donated, every hour of volunteer work, every word of encouragement turns into real hope in the lives of these little people." When the presentation ended, Mr. Henderson approached Ace with a proposal that would change everything again. "Ace," he said, "my company wants to finance the construction of a new building for the center, a space 3 times larger, with specialized rooms, a complete recreation area, and a cafeteria." "Mr. Henderson, that would be fantastic, but it must cost a fortune." $500,000, said Mr. Henderson, "and it's not a loan. It's an investment in the future of our town." The offer left Ace speechless. It was more money than he had imagined he could raise in years of operation. "But there's one condition," Mr. Henderson continued. "What is it?" that you agree to be our partner in a network of educational centers throughout Ohio. We want to replicate this model in at least 10 towns. Ace looked at Iris, who had listened to the whole conversation attentively. The girl smiled and nodded as if saying, "Accept it, Daddy." "Mr. Henderson," Ace said, extending his hand, "you have a deal." That night, Iris made an observation that perfectly summarized the journey they had taken together. "Daddy," she said as she prepared for bed, "remember when you found me in the empty lot?" "I remember, honey. That day you saved me, but you know what I discovered?" "What?" "That I saved you too." Ace hugged his daughter from the heart, knowing that she was absolutely right. In the worst moments of their lives, they had found each other and saved each other, and now they were together, saving other children, honoring Betty's memory and building a legacy of love that would spread throughout the state. A year and a half after that first cry that changed everything, Ace was in the office of the new Betty's Hope Educational Center when he received a call that completely shook him. It was from Bob Silverman, his lawyer, but his tone of voice was not encouraging at all. "Ace, I need to see you urgently," Bob said, "and bring Iris with you." "Bob, what happened? Is there a problem with the guardianship paperwork?" "It's not about guardianship, it's about Iris's biological family." Ace's heart froze. "What biological family? Didn't you say she was an orphan?" An aunt on her father's side showed up. A woman named Deirdre Santos. "She is questioning the guardianship and wants the girl back." "That's impossible!" Ace shouted, causing several children to look in the direction of the office. "Iris has been with me for over a year. She's my daughter." "Ace, you need to calm down and come here. The situation is complex." 2 hours later, Ace was at Bob's office with Iris by his side, the girl clearly sensing the tension in the air. In the room was a simple-looking woman, about 40 years old, with black hair tied in a ponytail and clothes that seemed to have seen better days. "This is Deirdre Santos," Bob said, making the introductions. "And this is Iris." Deirdre looked at the girl with an expression that was difficult to decipher. "My niece has grown," she said. "She's quite different from the last time I saw her." "When was the last time?" Ace asked suspiciously. "About 3 years ago," Deirdre replied vaguely, "before Betty died." Iris hid behind Ace, watching the woman cautiously. "Daddy," she whispered. "I don't remember her." "That's normal," Deirdre said quickly. "You were very little." Bob opened a folder with documents. Deirdre presented a birth certificate proving that she was the sister of Iris's father. Technically, she has family rights over the girl. "Where was she all this time?" Ace asked, his voice loaded with suspicion. "When Iris was on the streets being tortured, starving, where was this aunt who is now appearing?" Deirdre shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I was going through financial difficulties, working in Sao Paulo, trying to save money to be able to take care of her properly." "And now?" Ace insisted. "What changed?" "I got a stable job. I have a small house, but it's a home, and I want my niece to grow up knowing her roots, her real family." Iris clung tighter to Ace's arm. "Daddy, I don't want to leave. This is my real family." "Bob," Ace said, "what's the legal situation?" "Complicated," the lawyer admitted. "Ace has legal guardianship, but blood family ties carry significant weight in court, especially if Deirdre can prove that she can offer a stable environment." "And can she?" Ace asked, looking directly at Deirdre. "I can," she replied firmly. "I work as a nurse's aide at Harmony County Hospital. I earn 2 minimum wages, I have a 2-bedroom rented house, and I want to give Iris the chance to grow up knowing her true identity." "Her true identity?" Ace repeated, beginning to understand where the conversation was going. "Yes," said Deirdre, raising her chin. "Iris is a black child from a poor family who deserves to grow up knowing her origins, not being raised by a rich white man who wants to feel good about himself." The silence that followed was tense. Iris didn't fully understand the implications of what Deirdre was saying, but she sensed the hostility in the air. "Ms. Santos," Ace said, controlling his anger. "Let me make one thing clear. I didn't adopt Iris to feel good about myself. I saved her because she was being tortured, and I fell in love with her because she's an extraordinary child. Skin color, social origin, none of that matters when it comes to love." "Of course it matters," Deirdre replied. "You can give her money, expensive education, but you can never give her what I can: identity, belonging to her real community." "Daddy," Iris said suddenly, her voice small but firm, "what is real community?" Ace crouched down to be at the girl's level. "Real community, honey, are the people who love you, protect you, support you to be the best version of yourself. It doesn't matter what they look like or how much money they have. Like the people at the center, exactly like the people at the center." Deirdre scoffed impatiently. "You can philosophize all you want, but the fact is that Iris is my niece by blood, and I want her back." "Why now?" Bob asked. "Why only now, after the child is stable, happy, with a promising future?" Deirdre hesitated before answering. "Because only now have I managed to stabilize financially. Or because only now have you seen in the news that Iris is being raised by a rich businessman," Ace suggested. "That's a very serious accusation," Deirdre said, but her voice faltered slightly. "It's an observation based on very convenient timing," Ace replied. Bob intervened. "Let's stay focused on the legal aspects. Deirdre, do you have documentation proving that you can adequately provide for Iris?" "I do," she said, pulling papers from a worn bag. "Employment contract, proof of residence, certificates of good standing." Ace examined the documents. They seemed legitimate, but there was something that bothered him. "Bob, can I talk to you in private?" The two men left the room, leaving Deirdre with Iris. The girl remained silent, watching the woman who claimed to be her aunt. "Bob," Ace said in a low voice, "there's something wrong with all this. This woman appears out of nowhere just when Iris is doing well, when our story is being publicized in the media." "I have suspicions too," Bob admitted. "I've already put a private investigator to check her background. But legally, if she really is the sister of Iris's father, she has rights," Ace completed bitterly. "Even having abandoned the child when she needed it most." When they returned to the room, they found a scene that surprised them. Iris was sitting in the corner of the room, as far away from Deirdre as possible, hugging her backpack as if it were a shield. "What happened?" Ace asked immediately. "Nothing," Deirdre said quickly. "We were just talking." "Daddy," Iris said, running to Ace, "she said that if I didn't go with her, you would get tired of me and send me away anyway." Ace looked at Deirdre with pure fury. "How dare you scare a child?" "I didn't scare anyone," Deirdre defended herself. "I just explained reality. Rich men get tired of their charities." "Get out of here," Ace said, his voice low but threatening. "Now." "I don't need to leave," Deirdre replied, standing up. "I'm going to file a court order to regain custody of my niece, and I will allege that an environment where a black child is being raised by a rich white man is not suitable for her identity formation." "You're using Iris's racial identity as a weapon," Bob said, clearly disturbed. "That's disgusting." "I'm defending the rights of a child to grow up in her true community," Deirdre replied. "You'll hear from me soon." After Deirdre left, Iris remained glued to Ace, trembling slightly. "Daddy," she said in a small voice, "are you going to get tired of me?" "Never," Ace replied, hugging her tightly. "You're my daughter forever, no matter what happens." "But what if the judge says I have to go with her?" "Then we'll fight," Ace said, looking at Bob. "We'll fight with all the strength we have." "Ace," Bob said carefully, "you need to understand that this legal battle can be very difficult and very public. They're using racial issues, social class issues." "Bob," Ace interrupted, "a year and a half ago, this child was being tortured in an empty lot. Today, she's a happy, healthy, educated girl who helps other traumatized children. If a judge can't see the difference between abandonment and love, then there's something very wrong with our judicial system." That night, Ace and Iris sat in the backyard, watching the stars as they often did. But this time, there was a shadow hovering over them. "Daddy," Iris said suddenly, "if I leave, who will help Pedrinho and Maria Clara?" The question broke Ace's heart. Even facing the possibility of being separated from him, Iris was worried about other children. "Honey," he said, "I won't let anyone take you away. No matter what it takes. Promise?" "I promise with all my heart." But while Iris slept that night, Ace stayed awake, knowing that he had promised something he might not be able to fulfill. The legal battle that was approaching would be the most difficult of his life, and this time it wasn't just about money or reputation. It was about the daughter of his heart. The court battle began 2 weeks later, and with it came a smear campaign more cruel than Ace had ever faced. Deirdre had hired a lawyer specializing in family law issues and, worse, had turned the case into a racial cause that attracted attention from activists and media across the country. "Rich white businessman wants to keep black child as a trophy," read the newspaper headline that Bernice showed Ace on a tense morning. "Mr. Davenport," she said, worried, "they're distorting everything. They're making it seem like you're a bad person." Ace was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by legal papers and reports that Bob had prepared for the hearing. Iris was at school, thank God temporarily protected from the media circus that her life had become. "Bernice," he said, tired, "they're turning the love of a father and daughter into something sordid. How can I fight against that?" "With the truth," she replied firmly. "Everyone who knows you both knows what the truth is." At that moment, the phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson, the businessman who had become a partner in the educational center. "Ace," Mr. Henderson said, "I saw the news. This is ridiculous. You saved that child." "Mr. Henderson, thank you for the support, but—" "There's no but about it," Mr. Henderson interrupted. "My company will pay for the best lawyers in the country for you. I won't let them destroy a good man for doing the right thing." The unexpected support moved Ace. In recent days, he had felt completely alone against the world. "Mr. Henderson, I can't accept. It's already decided, and it's not just me. We've organized a group of business owners and families who know your work at the center. We're going to show this country that there are people willing to defend what is right." When he arrived home that afternoon, Ace found Iris in the backyard, but she wasn't playing as usual. She was sitting under the oak tree, drawing furiously in a notebook. "Hey, honey," he said, sitting down next to her. "What are you drawing?" "I'm drawing lies," she replied, showing a drawing where a dark female figure had a long tongue like a snake. "The teacher said that there are people on television telling lies about you." Ace sighed. He had tried to protect Iris from the controversy, but in a small town like Harmony Creek, it was impossible to completely hide the situation. "Iris," he said carefully, "you know that some people don't understand our family, right?" "I know," she said, continuing to draw. "They think it's strange because you're white and I'm black. But that doesn't matter, does it?" "It doesn't matter at all," Ace confirmed. "What matters is that we love each other." "Daddy," Iris said, stopping drawing and looking directly at him, "if the judge says that I have to go live with that woman, will you visit me?" The innocent question cut Ace's heart like a knife. "Iris, I'm going to fight to make sure that doesn't happen." "But what if it does happen?" Ace hugged his daughter tightly, trying to hide his own tears. "If it happens, I'll visit you every day I can, and I'll keep fighting to bring you back." 2 days before the hearing, Bob brought news that completely changed the game. The private investigator had uncovered devastating information about Deirdre. "Ace," Bob said, entering the center's office with the expression of someone who had struck gold, "you need to see this." "What did you find out?" "First, Deirdre Santos is not Iris's father's sister. She's a distant cousin. The documents she presented were falsified." "How so?" "The investigator found the real birth certificate of Iris's father. He had no sisters. Deirdre is the daughter of a cousin of his whom she never met personally." Ace felt a mixture of relief and anger. She lied blatantly. And there's more, Bob continued. Deirdre has a history of problems with alcohol and lost custody of her own child 5 years ago for neglect. That changes everything, doesn't it? It changes everything completely. But Ace, there is something you need to know. Her lawyer found out that we have this information and is changing his strategy. How so? Now, they are claiming that kinship doesn't matter. They are purely using the racial issue, saying that a black child should not be raised by a white family, regardless of the circumstances. Ace was silent, processing the information. The legal fight had turned into something much bigger and more complex than a simple custody dispute. "Bob," he said finally, "I need to talk to Iris about this." That night, Ace had the most difficult conversation of his life with Iris. He explained carefully about racial differences, about prejudice, about how some people thought that families should all be the same color. "But Daddy," Iris said, confused, "at school there are children of all colors, and they play together normally." "That's true," Ace agreed. "But some adults think differently than children." "That's silly," Iris said with the simple wisdom of childhood. "If people love each other, they can be family. Bernice isn't my color or your color, but she's part of our family." "Exactly, honey. Family is about love, not about color. So why does that woman want to take me away?" Ace took a deep breath. "Because she thinks she can make money from it, and because some people use differences to harm other people." On the morning of the hearing, a crowd gathered in front of the Harmony Creek courthouse. There were supporters of both sides, people who supported Ace and the educational center, and activists who had come from other towns to support Deirdre. "Justice for Iris," some shouted. "Black child in a black family," others shouted. Iris, wearing her best blue dress, held Ace's hand tightly as they entered the courthouse. "Daddy, there are a lot of people shouting." "I know, honey. But you just need to tell the truth to the judge, okay?" "Okay." The hearing was tense from the first moment. The judge, Dr. Charles Mendez, was known to be strict but fair. He first listened to the arguments of Deirdre's lawyer, who painted Ace as a rich man, trying to buy a black child to satisfy his own paternal desires. "Your Honor," said Deirdre's lawyer, "this child has the right to grow up knowing her African roots, her true cultural identity. She cannot be a social experiment of a white businessman." When it was Bob's turn to present the defense, he went straight to the point. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. Ace Davenport saved this child from a situation of torture and abandonment. For more than a year, he has provided love, care, education, and emotional stability for Iris. The petitioner, on the other hand, abandoned the child when she needed it most, and only appeared when she saw an opportunity for personal gain." The tensest moment of the hearing came when Iris was called to testify. The 7-year-old girl went to the front of the court with firm but small steps. "Iris," the judge said gently, "do you know why you are here?" "I know," she replied in a clear voice. "Because that woman wants me to go live with her, but I don't want to." "Why don't you want to?" "Because she doesn't know me. She doesn't know that I like Bernice's pancakes, or that I have nightmares sometimes, or that I like helping the children at Daddy's center." "And your daddy, Ace? He knows everything about me. He saved me when I was very scared, gave me a home, taught me that family is about love. And he lets me help other children who were sad like me." "Iris," the judge asked, "do you understand that you and your daddy Ace have different skin colors?" "I understand," she replied simply, "but that doesn't matter. Bernice is a different color than me and Daddy, and she's part of our family too. And how do you feel about your identity, about being a black child?" "I feel proud," Iris said, surprising even Ace. "Daddy taught me about important black people, about the history of my ancestors. He said that I can be anything I want to be, and that my color is beautiful." Iris's testimony left the court in silence. Even Deirdre's lawyer seemed shaken by the child's maturity and clarity. When the judge asked if she had anything else to say, Iris asked permission to speak directly to Deirdre. "Ma'am," she said, looking at the woman who claimed to be her aunt, "you seem to be a good person, but I already have a family that loves me. If you want to take care of a child, there are many children at Daddy's center who need love." The simplicity and generosity of Iris's words visibly touched everyone present. Some people in the audience began to cry, including members of the jury. The judge declared a recess for deliberation, and Ace left the court not knowing if he had just witnessed the most eloquent defense of his life or if he had lost his daughter forever. The court recess lasted 3 hours that seemed like an eternity. Ace, Iris, Bernice, and Bob waited in a small, stuffy room where the silence was broken only by the ticking of an old clock on the wall. Iris had fallen asleep in Bernice's lap, exhausted by the emotional stress of the hearing. "Bob," Ace whispered, "what's your impression?" "Honestly," replied the lawyer, "I think Iris spoke for herself better than any of us could have done. But judges are unpredictable, especially in cases with so much social pressure." At that moment, an officer came to bring everyone back to the court. Judge Dr. Charles Mendez was back in his place, with a serious expression that revealed nothing about his decision. "After careful deliberation," he began, "I have analyzed all aspects of this complex case. Child custody issues are never simple, and when elements of social class and racial identity are added, the complexity increases exponentially." Ace felt his heart beating so hard that it seemed the whole room could hear it. "However," the judge continued, "there are some facts that cannot be ignored. First, the petitioner Deirdre Santos presented falsified documentation about her kinship with the minor, which constitutes the crime of falsifying public documents." Deirdre paled visibly in her chair. "Second, the investigation revealed that the petitioner has a history of family neglect and problems with chemical dependency, factors that compromise her ability to exercise responsible guardianship." "Your Honor!" Deirdre's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge raised his hand. "Third, and most importantly, I heard the testimony of the minor herself, an exceptionally articulate and mature child for her age, who clearly expressed her desire to remain with her current family." Iris squeezed Ace's hand, beginning to understand that the judge's words were important for her future. "Although I recognize the importance of cultural identity in a child's formation, Dr. Mendez continued, I cannot ignore that Iris Santos is being raised by a family that clearly loves her, protects her, and educates her in an exemplary manner. The girl's testimony demonstrated that she is fully aware of her racial identity and is proud of it, indicating that she is being adequately guided in this aspect." The judge paused, observing all parties present. "Furthermore," he said, "the evidence presented shows that the petitioner Ace Davenport not only offers a stable home for Iris, but has also created a social project that benefits dozens of other children in vulnerable situations, demonstrating that his motivation to care for the minor transcends any selfish personal interest." Ace could barely breathe. Each word of the judge seemed to be building to something, but he couldn't guess what it would be. "Therefore," said Dr. Mendez, his voice echoing solemnly through the court, "custody of Iris Santos remains with Ace Davenport. Furthermore, I determine that Deirdre Santos be investigated by the public prosecutor's office for document forgery and attempted fraud." The relief that overcame Ace was so intense that he began to cry openly. Iris, realizing that she had won, hugged her father with all the strength of her small arms. "Daddy, does this mean I can stay with you forever?" "Forever, honey," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. "Forever." The audience burst into applause. On Ace's side, there were tears of joy. On Deirdre's side, there were some visibly disappointed people, but most were already leaving the court. Deirdre stood up slowly, looking one last time at Iris. For a moment, it seemed like she was going to say something, but then she simply shook her head and left accompanied by her lawyer. Outside the court, Ace was surrounded by journalists, supporters of the educational center, and people from the community who had followed the case. "Mr. Davenport," shouted a reporter, "how do you feel about the decision?" "I feel grateful," he replied, holding Iris in his arms. "Grateful to the justice system, grateful to the people who supported us, and especially grateful to be able to continue being the father of the most special child in the world." "Iris," asked another journalist, "what are you going to do now?" "I'm going to keep helping the children at Betty's Hope," she replied with conviction. "And I'm going to keep being the daughter of the best daddy in the world." 3 months after the court decision, life had returned to a happy and productive routine. Betty's Hope Educational Center had expanded to 3 new towns in Ohio, and Iris, now 8 years old, had become a local celebrity for her ability to help other traumatized children. "Daddy," she said one morning during breakfast, "remember when you found me in the empty lot?" "I remember, honey." "Why?" "I was thinking, that day you thought you were saving me, right?" "I thought so. But actually we saved each other." Ace smiled, remembering a similar conversation they had had months ago. "That's true, Iris. You taught me what really matters in life. And what matters? Love, family, making a difference in the lives of other people. You taught me all that." That afternoon, something extraordinary happened at the center. Ace was in his office when Bernice came to call him urgently. "Mr. Davenport, come see this." In the center's courtyard, there was an impromptu celebration. Pedrinho, the boy who had arrived mute from trauma, was reading aloud to a group of younger children. Maria Clara, who didn't speak to anyone when she arrived, was teaching a song to other girls. João was showing his drawings to visitors who had arrived from another town. "What's happening?" Ace asked. "The children themselves organized a thank you party," explained Raimunda emotionally. "They want to thank you for having a safe place to be." "And Iris?" "She's over there," Bernice pointed. Iris was sitting under the oak tree in the courtyard, surrounded by 5 younger children who were listening attentively as she told a story. "Once upon a time," Ace heard her say as he approached, "there was a girl who lived alone and very scared. But one day, an angel appeared to her and said, 'You are not alone. You have a family that you don't know yet.' And then?" asked one of the children, fascinated. "Then the girl discovered that family isn't just who you're born with. Family is also the people who choose to love you and protect you. And when she understood that, she was never afraid again." "And the girl was happy forever?" asked another child. "She was," replied Iris, smiling. "And she helped other children find their families too." Ace walked away silently, not wanting to interrupt that magical moment. He sat on a nearby bench and watched the scene. Dozens of children playing, laughing, learning, all safe and loved. "Mr. Davenport," said Father Michael, appearing beside him, "did you know that today is exactly 2 years since you found Iris?" Ace looked at the priest in surprise. "No, I didn't know. Time has passed so quickly. And look what you have built together in that time. It wasn't just me, Father. It was Iris, it was Bernice, it was you, it was the whole community. But it started with you hearing a child's cry and deciding to act," the father observed. "How many people hear cries for help and pretend they didn't?" Ace thought about the question. 2 years ago, he was a wealthy and lonely businessman focused only on money and status. Today, he was the father of an extraordinary girl and the director of a social project that had changed the lives of hundreds of children. "Father," he said, "can I confess something?" "Of course. I didn't save Iris. She saved me. She taught me that life only has meaning when we live for something bigger than ourselves." "And what is that something bigger?" Ace looked at the courtyard, where Iris was now playing Ring Around the Rosie with other children, her crystalline laughter echoing through the afternoon air. "Love," he said simply, "unconditional love that doesn't see color, social class, or origin. Love that transforms pain into hope, abandonment into family, fear into courage. That night at home, Iris asked her daily question before bed. "Daddy, tell me our story." "Which part of our story?" Ace asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. "All of it. From the beginning." Ace smiled and began. "Once upon a time there was a man who thought he had everything, but he actually had nothing. And once upon a time there was a girl who had nothing, but she actually had everything." "What did she have?" Iris asked, even though she already knew the answer. "She had the ability to love, to forgive, to transform any place into a home. And when the man found the girl, they both discovered that together they could create a family that didn't depend on blood, but on choice." "And they lived happily ever after?" "They did," Ace said, kissing his daughter's forehead. "And they lived to help other people find their own happiness too." As Iris fell asleep, Ace spent a few minutes watching her. In 2 years, that child had transformed his life in ways he never imagined possible. He had lost a wife, a lot of money, a life of superficial luxury, but he had gained a daughter, a purpose, a true family, and the certainty that he was making a difference in the world. On the other side of town, at the educational center that now operated into the night to serve more children, a gold plaque shone under the light of the street lamps. "Betty's Hope Educational Center, where every cry for help is heard, and every child finds a family." And at that moment, Ace knew that his life had found its true meaning. Not in the dealerships he owned, not in the luxurious house where he lived, not in the money he had accumulated, but in the unconditional love of a child who had taught him that the greatest treasures in life cannot be bought, only won through the courage to do what is right, even when the whole world is saying it's wrong. The story of the businessman who heard a cry and changed 2 lives forever had become a legend in Harmony Creek. But for Ace and Iris, it wasn't a legend. It was simply family.